Whenever you want, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 11th, 2020 meeting of the Goffstown Select Board. This meeting is being conducted remotely via WebEx with public access via telephone. There'll be much more detailed information on that in just a moment. But if you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance as the first order of business. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So here's some information relative to the meeting tonight. It's known as the Right to Know Law meeting checklist. As chair of the Goffstown Select Board, due to the COVID-19 outbreak and in accordance with Governor Sununu's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are doing several things. A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. The town is utilizing the WebEx platform for this electronic meeting. The public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following telephone number, area code 603-766-5646. Again, that's 603-766-5646, and using the participate code 785-645, followed by the pound sign. Again, that's 785-645. And make sure you follow it with a pound sign. B, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. The town previously gave notice to the public of how to access the meeting using the available telephone number with a posted agenda. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem with telephone access, please call 603-384-3624 and will provide assistance. D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, I will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. We'll start by the meeting by taking a roll call of attendance. When each member states their name, their presence, also please state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the Right to Know Law. I'm Selectman Collis Adams, and there is no one present with me in the room at this time.
Peter Georgiantis, there's no one in the room with me at this time.
Kelly Boyer, there's no one in the room with me at this time.
Chet Bowen, there's no one in the room with me at this time.
And I'll also note that Selectman Mark LeMay is not present. He's at home. He's recovering from some surgery, recent surgery, so we give our best to him. He won't be joining us tonight. Next, we're going to take public comment. Is there anyone on for public comment that you see, Derek?
We do have some callers on the line. If anybody is on the line for public comment and would wish to comment during the public comment section, they can hit *9 on their telephone at this time. I do have one comment. I'd ask that when I unmute, that you identify yourself and provide your address for the board. And go ahead. Oh, that number just dropped off. There was one person on for public comment that raised their hand, and as soon as I unmuted them, they dropped off. So
No one else?
nope, nobody else.
I'd also like to add that you can access by watching the meeting live on Goffstown Television Channel 22 or on the GTV Facebook page. But you should be aware that Facebook will not be monitoring for public participation during public comment. Residents interested in participating in public comment should call the public telephone access number that was previously given. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the acceptance and correction of the minutes from the 4/27/2020 meeting, public minutes. We have a motion on the minutes, please.
I'll make that motion. We approve the minutes of 4/27/20.
Thank you, Peter.
I'll
Second.
second.
Thank you. That was Kelly, I believe, right?
Yep.
Okay, the roll call. Adams, yes. Boyer,
Yes.
Georgantis,
Yes.
and Bowen.
Yes.
Mark's not here. Thank you. Are there any announcements? I don't have any announcements with me. Are there any announcements from any of the other board members that you'd like to share?
Collis, I'd like to share the display of support for the nurses at the Hillsborough County Farm the other day, at the Hillsborough County Home the other day. Anybody that got a chance to see it, it was pretty awesome, with Goffstown, Boston, I believe Ware, and the Sheriff's Department. I thought that was pretty awesome, and I continue to support our public safety officials, fire department, police department, and DPW to get out in the community as much as possible.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I would agree with you. I also honk my horn very loudly every time I go by. Any other announcements from board members? Okay, seeing none, we have an appointment at 6:15. Why don't we jump down to the town administrator's report and get started on that?
Okay, I will let you know that we do have Mr. Haggerty. He has called in and he is on the telephone, but we can wait for that appointed time. And
Okay, great.
take him at 6:15 in case anyone saw that time advertised. At tab 6A of your packet, you have the committee meeting schedule for this week. Tomorrow night at 6 p.m., the Sewer Commission is meeting. I believe Selectman Bowen.
Yep, I'll be there.
Okay. And on Thursday at 7 p.m., the Planning Board is meeting.
I'll be there. I have my packet.
Okay. And then just a reminder that next Monday at 6 p.m., the board has a special meeting to make up for Memorial Day. So we will be meeting next Monday at 6 p.m. At the next page is the consent agenda. You have employee status reports for rehire of 2 Parks Summer Ground seasonals. You have a betterment assessment warrant for the Lynchville Danish Park Water Betterment Assessment in the amount of $20,637.84. You also have the first half property tax warrant in the amount of $20,935,512.40.
Thank you. Anyone?
Motion to
Motion to approve.
Agenda is presented.
Okay. Okay. Kelly, motion to approve, second by Peter. I vote yes. Kelly,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and Chet.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0. Again, Selectman Lemay is not present. All righty.
Next page, you have assessor's recommendations. You have a report of excavated material and gravel tax warrant for tax year 2019 for map 6, lot 11-1. You also have a notice of intent to excavate for the tax year 2020, recommended for map 6, lot 11-1. Both are recommended.
Thank you, Derek.
Motion to approve the assessor's recommendation as presented.
Thanks, Peter.
Second.
Second by Chet. Thank you. A motion and a second to approve as recommended. Adams is yes. Kelly,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and Chet.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously 4-0.
At tab 6D, you have a memo from the Public Works Director. The Sewer Commission had alerted him on Friday of necessary repair to private sewer connection at 29 Glenridge Avenue. It's currently under moratorium until May 8th, 2023. The the town's street excavation rules do provide for circumstances warranting waiver of the moratorium. Again, this would be emergency repairs that are needed for an existing service that has failed. That would be included. It does require select board approval, and there is a recommended motion in your packet.
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend the approve the waiver moratorium for a private sewer service repair at 29 Glen Ridge Ave, contingent upon the applicant signing a road moratorium guideline agreement with the typical street excavation permit application to DPW. Also with conditions set forth by the DPW director, which was issued to us earlier by email.
Thank you. The motion's been made by Peter. Do you have a second?
Chairman, can I just clarify one thing?
Yep, sure.
I think that what I did provide you an email with some conditions from DPW. That is related to the matter that's scheduled for appointment at 6:15, not,
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay,
not this one.
but there's still, there were still guidelines that need to be followed on this, am I right?
Yes.
Okay, so we did have a motion by Peter and a second by Chet. Any discussion on that motion? I vote yes. Kelly,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and Chet.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously 4-0.
So, Mr. Chairman, I can move on to the next item if you'd like, number C, or we could go to the appointment. I don't know how much discussion would be involved on 6E. That is the first responders stipend program.
Yeah, if we're ready to go with the 6:15 appointment, why don't we move on to that and just let know.
Okay, if you go to tab 5 in your packet.
Yep.
And I do have Mr. Haggerty on the telephone here from 11 South Mass.
Good evening, Mr. Haggerty.
Good evening, sir.
So when I talked to Mr. Haggerty on Friday, I told him I would summarize what he is requesting. And again, you have this in your packet. He's requesting permission to trench across a road prior to it being repaved this year. This is the small road that runs in front of French and Rising Funeral Home that runs parallel with South Mass. And he actually has a small sliver, I guess a small piece of pie land on the South Mass road side. And before this road is repaved this year, he has requested permission to trench across so that he can bring irrigation to the other side and the electrical that's related to that. And also some electrical just in case he wants to, I think, and Mr. Haggerty can correct me, but if at some point in the future he needed it for a lamp or anything of that nature. I guess his idea was for a pole light.
Yeah.
So in your packet and what was emailed out to you this afternoon was the recommendation from DPW. In your packet, you have a revocable temporary license. And if it's all right with the chair, I'd just read in the 4 conditions that DPW has recommended.
Sure, please do.
That a street opening permit would be required from DPW. That DPW recommends installing a larger sleeve pipe with H20 load rating, and that each side of the pipe shall extend outside the right-of-way. All utilities shall be a minimum of 24 inches down with caution tape buried 8 inches above the utility. And then as-built location, swing tie measurements, and photos shall be provided to DPW after installation. So again, those were the conditions that DPW would ask for should the board approve this.
Thank you, Derek. So, Mr. Haggerty, do you have anything to add, and are you agreeable to those conditions?
I'm agreeable to the term, certainly.
Okay. Any of the board members have questions or concerns?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Peter.
I want to guarantee that, I don't want to guarantee, I shouldn't say it that way. But what happens if things change and we don't decide to pave that this year? Is he going to wait for a okay to go ahead and excavate by TPW before they pave?
Is Adam on?
Comment to that.
Adam is on.
Hi. So I think in that situation, if you look in your packet, I think a couple pages down, we've got after the license, there's I'm sorry, right before the license, there's a photo of the current condition there. Pretty rough. I would think if Mr. Haggerty's amenable to it, if for some reason we don't end up paving, if he just does a regular trench repair that we would normally require with a street opening permit, it wouldn't be under moratorium, of course, yet. So it would just be a pretty simple trench repair. So we've got our standards in the street excavation ordinance, so he can follow those. And then Eric would follow up just like we would on a normal street excavation, if that works.
Yeah, so he could carry on with the work. And then it will be repaved whenever it gets repaved. Right?
That's correct. Yep, it's in pretty rough shape, so it would stay
Yeah.
near the top of the list if we don't get to it for some reason.
Okay. Any other board members have questions or want to offer opinions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we approve the agreement for the trench to go across the road.
I'll second.
Thank you. Peter made the motion and
With the conditions that were presented tonight.
yeah, thank you. Peter made the motion. Kelly seconded the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, I'll call the vote. I say yes. Kelly?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes,
Yes.
she said, yeah, I
Peter?
say yes.
And
Yes,
Chet, yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes unanimously 4-0.
can I ask just one question, Collis?
Sure.
Of the other members, does it keep cutting out on you or is it just mine?
Yours cuts out. You cut out every once in a while. I think it's just you that I noticed.
Okay, maybe I need to use a different laptop or something, or different communications, but it just cuts out like you'd be talking and I won't hear what you're saying.
So, Mr. Haggerty, they did approve your request, and I will be in touch about the necessary waivers and permits tomorrow, okay?
Thank you very much, Derek. Thank you, Select Board.
Yep. Good evening, Mr. Haggerty.
I know.
Right.
Okay. Let's see.
Okay, so I think we had left off at the Town Administrator Report, tab 6E.
Correct. Yep.
So this is on Monday, May 4th. The governor announced, he announced a couple things on last Monday, which kept staff quite busy last week. But one of the items that he announced was the First Responders COVID-19 Stipend Program. This was a program being offered by the state using the Federal CARES Act funds that came into the state to provide an 8-week and 2-day stipend from May 4th through June 30th to all first-time responders. Those first-time responders that work and are available full-time during a week would qualify for $300, and those part-time responders would qualify for $150. In your packet, I've included the copy of the information on New Hampshire Homeland Security and Emergency Management about the program, as well as their frequently asked questions that go into who would qualify for that stipend, how to make those distinctions. But tonight, myself, as well as the police chief, the fire chief, and the finance director, making the recommendation that the board accept and expend the CARES Act funds in the amount of $130,499.82 for participation in the stipend program, and direct finance to pay that eligible first responders on a weekly basis. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I'll make the motion for discussion.
Thank you, Peter. I need a second from,
I'll second.
thank you, Chet. Motion by Peter, second by Chet. there any discussion on the motion?
My
Peter?
question would be, how long does it take to get the money back?
So I do have the finance director on the phone who worked with both the chiefs. We will be submitting a spreadsheet from both the fire department and the police department that will go up to the state of what we anticipate for those first responders that would qualify during the stipend period. I believe they will review that and they will send us the funds. And what we do is, our recommendation is to pay that out on a weekly basis. So we would pay that as part of the employee's payroll check, and that they would receive that stipend on a weekly basis. If there is any reason that a first responder is not eligible because they're not available, they may be taking vacation time, or just, again, they don't meet the qualifications during a certain week, they would not be paid out that stipend. And then when we get to the end of the period, we would return any unused funds to the state of New Hampshire in accordance with their this. And I don't know if Danielle has anything to add beyond that.
Yes, that is correct, Derek. They did indicate that they would be issuing checks within a couple weeks of approving those rosters. So we anticipate we would be funding for the first week being this past week, and this current week, and then potentially one more week before we see those funds. The state does do direct deposit with us, so it's a pretty quick turnaround once something is approved. And then at the end of the process, we would be reconciling with the state and, like Derek said, either returning unused funds, or if for some reason the estimated amount was below what we used, then the state would be reimbursing us. But the chiefs have both put together a list of all active roster members, so we're not anticipating any underfunding in this case.
Thank you, Daniel.
One more question. Yeah.
Go, Peter.
Danielle, how does this show up as on their check? Is it just put into them as regular pay? So if something happens, that would be considered part of their payroll for this 5 or 6 weeks? Or is it carried separately?
It's carried, there's two different questions there. So it does go into their paycheck, but it goes in as a separate stipend pay. It's a new pay type, so it doesn't show up as regular hours. It's going to be coded as a stipend. It does go into their regular pay if we're calculating FLSA. So, say somebody ends up having a workers' comp issue and it averages out their, how much workers' comp would pay. They average over 52 weeks before they determine someone's rate. However, it does not count towards their retirement or anything else. It's only FICA and Medicare that's required to be paid on this. So it's not eligible for any other benefits or wouldn't change anybody's benefit category otherwise.
Yeah, I think there's a question and an answer in the FAQs related to that as well. Thank you, Danielle.
You're welcome.
Any other board members? All right, we do have a recommended motion. Someone care to make a?
Oh, I seconded it already, Carl. Sorry.
Oh, okay, thank you. Who made the original motion? It must have been Peter.
I did.
Peter.
I did.
Peter and then Chet. Okay. So call the roll. I say yes. Ellie,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and Chet.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-0. Unanimous. Next.
At tab 6F, again, Danielle has done a great job. And what she has put together, and you have in your packet, a matrix that we're using here with the different departments to track the available COVID-19 funding opportunities. And we wanted to take a few minutes to talk about those different funding opportunities and let the board know where we are with those.
That would be great.
So if you look on the first fold-out page of your packet, across the top has the grant name and what we're referring to it internally. So the first one is an AFG grant. That's the Assistance to Firefighter grant. This is a pretty competitive grant. There's only 1,000 recipients nationwide, but it does have a 95% match from FEMA with only 5% local. And it's my understanding, and maybe the fire chief can speak to this a little bit, that with the deadline this week of May 15th, it's my understanding that the deputy chief Enos has been working on that grant submission, and maybe Chief Allard can just speak quickly to what's being sought for reimbursement under that.
Thanks. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, everyone. Town Administrator is correct. Deputy Enos is working on that grant, and it's due to be submitted by this Friday. Last week, and I think Derek's going to talk a little bit about the Department of Justice grant. We had to kind of make a shift after the finance director and I spoke with them last week and had to actually reduce their initial submission. And so we took some of those items that we reduced based on their recommendations and shifted those over to the AFG grant that we're submitting this week.
Thank you. Any questions from board members on the AFG grant?
What kind of money are you talking about? Were you asking for, do you know?
So the original Department of Justice grant, and finance director can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe was somewhere around $140,000.
It was it was 152 and change.
And where would that 5% match come from?
Something this board and the EOC team is going to have to decide on moving forward.
And just to clarify for Fire Chief Allard, these are for funds that have already been spent in response to COVID-19 that we are seeking reimbursement. So those, I guess that match would be taken out of those funds already spent, which came out of the operating budget.
Thank you. Peter, you want to follow up?
Well, if I just understand what Derek just said was, we're going to get the 5% match, and if it's 150,000, that's a chunk of dough, $7,500 or so. That's going to come out of what we're getting reimbursed from the state. Is that what I understood?
No, this grant is a reimbursement for funds that we've already spent. The town has already spent in response to COVID-19. So we've already spent these funds. They include personnel hours. They include equipment. This is funds that have already gone out for efforts that have already been made. This is really to seek reimbursement for 95% of those funds that have already been spent.
Okay.
Other board members? Okay, let's go on to the next one, please.
The next one is the Department of Justice grant, the DOJ grant that is for first responders. Again, this was originally submitted by the fire department and the finance director for an amount of $152,168.43. After talking with the Department of Justice and Homeland Security last week, there were some items in there that were ineligible, and those have been removed. Everything's been resubmitted, and you'll see that's been for an amount of $48,931.09. Again, that's for expenses already incurred, and those ineligible expenses under that grant have been moved to the AFG grant, and if they don't go on to the AFG grant, it will go into one of the three remaining that we have highlighted for you tonight.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Kelly.
Thank you. Derek, this is rolling submission. So are they looking at the money we've already spent, but if we held off in submitting, is there a potential to get more reimbursement?
I think the finance director can answer that question.
Yes, so at this time, they do have a rolling submission. However, it's while the funds are available. So they indicated it would be best for us to submit early for what we have already incurred. And then part of what reduced the cost was initially they told us, go ahead and put in everything. And then as additional grant opportunities came out, they sort of revised that scope and narrowed it down as they wanted to point people towards some of the other grant opportunities that were only rolled out in this past week or so, and then come back to their DOJ grant as kind of a gap filler if it's not covered in another grant. So at this time, we're submitting everything that we had through April 19th on that DOJ grant, and then we will continue to submit to the other grants. And if something comes up that would qualify under this DOJ grant, but does not qualify on another grant or is a newly incurred cost, we would continue to submit an additional application if there are funds still available in that grant program.
So we want to submit early on this one, as early as we can.
We
Yes.
did submit, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, for this one, there was only $3.4 million set aside for this program. And there was discussion amongst the EOC staff that some of the bigger cities and their first responder forces could eat those funds up really quick. So that's why there was a rush to get an initial application in the door for this.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from board members?
I have one question. Do we have a spreadsheet of some kind that shows what we've spent in the COVID-19?
Yes, the chief and I are.
Oh, sorry, you don't have one in your packet this evening, but the finance director and fire chief, emergency management director are maintaining that list of expenses.
Great.
And it's how much so far? Danielle, maybe?
Through April 19th, the number was the 152,000. It's continued to go up slightly. However, it depends on the purchases. Some of our remote work purchases and items of that nature have slowed down a bit, while our PPE is starting to gear up a bit more. So that number continues to be kind of a moving target. But at this point, we're still under the 200,000 mark as far as all of our overtime and expenses and everything at this point.
Thank you. And anything else on the DOJ grant from anyone? Okay, thanks. Let's move on to the Homeland Security Emergency Management.
Yes, the Homeland Security and Emergency Management that you see in the middle column there, that is your traditional FEMA reimbursement for a declared declaration. It's a 75% match from FEMA and a 25% match. This one is probably the more complicated of the submissions and the funds that we'll probably seek later on down in the process, especially because it has the match. And some of the other funds have deadlines that come due quicker. So this one is, again, this is the traditional FEMA reimbursement that the town seeks after a declaration that's out there.
So have we identified any resources and hours that we can donate towards a 25% match?
At this point, again, since this is a reimbursement of a declared disaster, everything that we have already spent would count towards that, as long as it's not covered by another grant. However, salary hours, and there are some additional management administrative percentages that this grant allows us to count towards that match.
Thank you. Other board members have questions?
I have a question.
Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you. This one specifically notes, Danielle, unpaid EMS bills. Is there any other grants that cover EMS bills? And is that bills in relations to patients, I'm assuming?
So there are a variety of grants that cover this in one form or another. This is part of the funds that the CARES Act covered were EMS bills, but those were the funds that the board voted to return at the last meeting due to the additional strings attached and complications of accepting that particular funding stream. However, this one, it seems from what we understand at this point, we're still waiting for additional details as they're getting through the frequently asked questions and items of that nature. They do indicate that if it's an unpaid bill, we may be able to submit that under this grant. So it would be for someone who is either a COVID positive or COVID presumed transport that does not have any sort of billing, they're an uninsured individual, then we may be able to seek reimbursement. So far, when we've asked about that particular item, the guidance has been, well, it's complicated and we'll have to discuss it with your liaison to determine at that time.
Okay.
Other questions?
I would say that, like to say that, as Derek indicated, this is a fairly complicated grant, this particular one, but they do assign us an individual from Homeland Security. Her name is Liz, and the fire department has been in direct contact with her, and the chief, deputy chief, and myself are in a kind of a ongoing email thread with her to make sure we stay in the loop about everything, and they are assigning her to our case. So as we submit the grant, she will be working with us directly and walking us through the process and helping us determine what's allowed and what's not.
Well, that's very helpful. Thank you. Other questions from board members? Okay, if not, let's move on to the Gopher.
Yes, so the next column are the Gopher Municipal Relief Funds. We will be using the term Gopher quite a bit in the future. This is the Governor's Office for Economic Recovery and Reopening, or Reopening and Recovery. I don't recall what the order was, but this was announced last Monday of $32 million to municipalities and $8 million to counties of CARES Act funding. And this is one that has a pretty quick turnaround. This is 3 submission deadlines. So they use 2018 population estimates to break that $32 million out. So the amount of funding available to Goffstown is $423,304. Any unused fund at the end of this program will be returned to the Gopher for reallocation for some future program. But they have really 3 periods. They have a submission period of June 1st, and that is for March 1st through April 30th. All eligible expenses incurred during that period. And then July 15th for May 1st through June 30th. And then one last one in September 15th. That would be July 1st through August 31st. These municipal funds make up some of the expenses that are not caught by either the FEMA reimbursement grant or by maybe the DOJ or the AFG grant. If you look on your, I guess your second page, there is a link or a list of eligible items. Just to highlight a couple that we are going to be taking advantage of and that we've kind of earmarked as EOC, the municipal building modifications. Many municipal buildings are going to require protective barriers between employees and customers. We are working on those currently. There's also facility signage. There's going to be required signage for, what people can enter, what we're asking of them when they enter public buildings, but also working with Parks and Rec on what type of signage they need for public distancing and use of some of our public facilities that are outdoors as well. So it's, really that we are trying to identify all those expenses that would be eligible under this program that we're spending so that we can make sure that we, get as much reimbursement for the town or on behalf of the town as we can.
Questions from board members on the Gopher?
I have some questions.
Sure, go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you. On this one, it says increased election cost,
Mhm.
if not covered by other federal funding. Have we caught wind of any other grant that would supplement additional election costs?
There are none that have been identified out there yet.
Okay.
You need, just so you can, we were very fortunate that we were able to hold our March town meeting when we did. There are many
Yeah.
communities in New Hampshire that either have an April or May meeting, or they hold a traditional meeting where everyone gathers, that still have not done their annual town meeting. And they're going to have a significant cost. So it would be for that. And then we will see as we approach the state primaries and the general election. The only problem with the state primaries and the general election in November are some of those expenses may fall outside of the August 30th deadline for these funds. And that's usually an election that's run by the state, that's administered at the local level. So we'll continue to stay in touch with the state on whether these funds would qualify for any of those expenses.
Okay, thank you. And then under the coverage limitations, it does say cannot cover lost revenue, cannot be used to cover property tax abatements. Same question, do we know of anything that's out there currently that can be used for those items?
There has been nothing that has come down from the federal government or the CARES Act to replace lost revenue or to replace any lost revenue due to abatement on properties. So as of yet, there is nothing. I understand there may be some legislation at the federal level that deals with this. And I know that the New Hampshire delegation, our senators and representatives, are aware of the concern that local towns and municipalities and cities have in New Hampshire, and they brought that to the federal level. But at this time, there is no program that would replace those revenues.
Thank you.
Kelly, you have anything else?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Other board members? Okay, let's move on to the last one. This is
The last one is, once again, this is the CARES Act funding that was voted upon a few moments ago by the board. This is the first responder stipend program.
Yep.
So this is an amount of $130,000, round up to $500. And just so you're aware, the New Hampshire Municipal Association has provided guidance on acceptance of this federal emergency money. It is included within your packet with the first responders at the back right before tab 6F or actually, I'm not seeing it in there. So I'll email you that information and we can post that on our website, that the New Hampshire Municipal Association, what they've provided for their recommendation on acceptance of this CARES Act funding. So that information is out there.
Great, so we'll see some follow-up on that shortly.
Yes.
Thank you. Anything else? Derek or Danielle?
I think Danielle had one thing.
Danielle, go ahead.
I just wanted to note that at the bottom of your third page of the spreadsheet, there is a list of additional pending funding opportunities that we've got our eye on. The state has applied on behalf of the whole entire state for the FEMA hazard mitigation and the FEMA individual assistance through HSEM at the federal level. So those are still pending. More word to come once the federal government makes a decision on that application. And there's a couple other items there. Educational stabilization fund, that would be specifically for the school district. However, we thought it important to note it and note that it is on our radar as grant funds, and the same for the New Hampshire Child Care Collaborative Fund. And then we're continuing to track other private foundation grants. And right now there is one that the fire department is currently looking to complete And that is something the deputy chief has been working on to see if they can get funding from a private foundation for additional equipment. So we're continuing to keep an eye, and we're going to be updating our spreadsheet as any funding opportunities come forth for the town.
Thank you. Anything else from board members? Questions for either Derek or Danielle? All right, thank you. Now we're moving on to tab 6G.
Yes. So in the town administrator's report, the last item I have for you this evening is a 2020 state primary and general elections update. I know that Vice Chair Boyer reached out to me last week, and I kind of thought to myself, well, that's such a long way away. It's a little bit early to be worried about that, but there are quite a few dates that are upcoming that are impacted. Presently, voter registration and change of party status for those people that are registered is open through June 2nd. On June 2nd, the supervisors of the checklist have a mandatory session that is required. It's a statutory requirement that they finalize the checklist for the September state primary. And immediately thereafter, there's the filing period for all offices for state primary election. So we have reached out to the supervisors of the checklist, and the clerk and I are working with them so that they can meet that requirement. But we are also considering whether that we can provide some type of, whether it's a drive-through meeting where those people that are interested in registering to vote and identify themselves for a specific party, or do a change of party status so that they'd be eligible to file, that they can do that. So we're working out the details, and I hope to have more information for you next Monday on your meeting on that.
So Derek, you do this in a back parking lot?
Yes, whether it's the back parking lot here at Town Hall, advertised for a set time to get the word out. I know that DPW, Adam Jacobs, has also graciously offered to host there because they have a significant amount of vehicle queuing that could occur on their location there, depending on how long we would set to do this. And so I have reached out to the supervisor of the checklist and am in conversation with the town clerk to try and do a little bit more than just the mandatory June 2nd meeting, because the mandatory June 2nd meeting is the time where they lock it in. Under normal circumstances, people would be able to come into town hall, change their party status, or register with the town clerk, but that is a service that is very difficult to do at this time, with town hall being closed to the public.
Thank you, Derek. Anything from board members relative to this item?
If we were going to do a drive-through type thing, would we do it at maybe both ends of town? You're just going to do it in the village?
I think we could consider doing it at multiple locations at different times. I think, or find a more centralized location than the village. Maybe the transfer station is a more centralized location for people from all throughout town, but we would definitely consider all options.
I personally think it'd be a better service to the community if we did two locations, Town Hall and the Pinardville Fire Station might be appropriate, I would think.
Fire station, you could either do it at the elementary school, you could drive right through out to the back side, so.
Yeah, that would work.
You could do it either place.
Yeah, and my point being, I think we ought to do it in both locations in town, to provide better service for
I agree.
the citizens. Okay. Any
I
other
guess,
board-
and beyond preparing for the June 2nd, there is quite a bit of work up at the state level in preparation for the primaries and the general election in November. So last week, I guess the Secretary of State's office has pushed out guidance. He pushed this out earlier in April about the use of absentee ballots during the primary and the general election. And as we approach those, we will be advertising those. But there will be a process for those registered voters that are concerned about their exposure to COVID, that they would deem to qualify under the definition of disability, and they would be able to request an absentee ballot. This is currently being studied and discussed at the state level. The Secretary of State did form, it's called the Select Committee on 2020 Emergency Election Support. This is a 6-member committee. We're fortunate that Representative Barbara Griffin is on this committee and has been in touch with both me and the town clerk about some of our concerns and questions about this as we prepare for those. So, you know, as the state provides further guidance on how to prepare for the primary and the general election in November, I would like to form a staff working group that would include myself, the town clerk, as well as election officials, moderator, supervisor of the checklists, and at least one select board member, as well as Representative Griffin, as she sits on this committee and has firsthand knowledge, so that we can start to prepare for those elections in the fall. There are going to be a lot of complications with manning the elections and handling potentially the number of absentee ballots. And at this point, we're just waiting on a little bit more information and guidance from the state.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Derek, to pull that group together so we can get
I
on top.
would volunteer if you want, or whatever you want to do, Collis, but I would volunteer to do something like that.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Then you'll be the select board representative on that work group.
Okay, thank you.
And Derek, you'll take care of pulling the rest of the work group together, right?
Yeah, again, we would do it as a work group, and any recommendations that requires either appropriation or I guess board approval, we would bring that back to you. But right now, we're just seeing what the state, we're waiting on guidance specifically right now on June 2nd. The Secretary of State's office has promised some additional guidance on that mandatory supervisors with a checklist meeting. But after that, yeah, we'll be in full planning mode, and how do we man those polls come September and November. So we will definitely update the board on a regular basis and include Selectman Georgianis on those meetings.
Okay, so Derek, there's no action
Thank you.
required of this board at this time, and we'll just wait for you to set up the work group.
Yeah, there's no action. I just wanted to bring it forward to your attention. Again, when it came to my attention last week, I kind of thought, well, this is a long way off, but this is going to take a significant amount of planning and resources on the town side. And I can answer any questions the board might have or field questions as we move forward.
Thank you. Any questions from other board members on this approach? Thanks, Derek, and thanks, Pete, for volunteering.
You're welcome.
Let's see, I lost my place. Where are we? That was 6G we just did, right? So we're on 7, tab 7. Well, this is old business, new business, and action matrix. You know, to just run through this, I mean, we've got it in front of us, but if you can just run through it quickly.
Yes, under new business, I didn't have any new business that hasn't already been addressed. Under old business, I did put on there the Wallace Road roundabout discussion. I know that the board received their first presentation on that at your last meeting.
Mhm.
We do Chief Serino as well as Adam Jacobs on. They're present at the meeting this evening to see if we can answer any questions or to see if you want to review those short-range plans and prioritize any or consider a process for public input on either the short-term or long-term plans or where the board wants to go with the improvements at that location.
Yeah, I think we ought to focus on the short-term or short-range plans that were presented to us.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep, sure, Pete.
I think this should be tabled for right now, and the only reason I say that is we don't know what our budget shortfall is. I think if you go down further, you'll see there's a potential of budget shortfalls and revenue shortfalls. And this is something that we're living with right now, and I don't really know if it's going to be budget money this year or next year that we can really attack that with.
No, I would agree, Pete. I mean, there's no action required of this board really at this time. I think this is more just a placeholder to keep it on our radar and keep it in front of us. But yeah, certainly budget's going to be a big piece of this. Other board members?
So my motion is to table.
No, I'll just table it. I don't need a motion. We'll table
Okay,
this.
thank you.
Okay, and then we have, let's see, the select board goals.
So
I'd just like to bring
I
up
sent-
Go ahead, Peter.
I just want to bring up one more thing. I know it's been in the action matrix and questions about the master plan update. I spoke to Chairman Griffin, and she's going to approach the planning board on with it on Thursday night, just to go over what's done so far. So if anybody wants, then you'll be able to find out where we stand on that. We've got partial. We haven't got it all done yet, but she told me she was going to update the planning board, which, as we all know, the master plan is a function of the planning board. That she would update the board on Thursday night.
That's good to know, Peter. And you'll keep us up to speed.
Yep, as soon as I know, you'll know.
Thank you. What else, Derek?
The next item I have under old business would be the 2020 select board goals. I did send out a draft copy on, I don't know if it was Thursday or Friday, that had, was for the most part pretty complete for human resources as well as project management. I had started in on economic development and communication as well. Those still need a little bit of work, and I have not been able to get the final draft of that portion, but I didn't know if you wanted to discuss the human resources portion or those that I sent out to you. They are not included in your packet, but those were distributed to board members on Thursday as a draft document.
Okay, so I'll throw it out to the board members. Give Derek any additional feedback on our goals.
Yeah, so Derek, on the economic development, I think we wanted to add the sector by sector approach, operationalizing the actual council itself and doing a sector by sector approach with a transparent schedule that allows for any current businesses to know where our focus will be at any given time. Other than that, it looks like you caught most of the things we discussed. I think, Derek, you were monitoring the meeting Wednesday night, right?
Yes, I listened to the entire Economic Development Council meeting Wednesday night, yes.
Right. So I think that was the only thing that we discussed that's not on here right now.
Okay.
But that's about it for me for now.
Thanks, Chet. Others? Feedback on where the goals stand at this point? They've come a long ways, Derek. Thank you for putting that effort in. Let's not let up on the accelerator. Let's keep this thing moving forward. You got additional feedback and comments for Derek on any of the goals, by all means, please get a hold of Derek as soon as possible.
Mr. Chair, I'll give you an update on the HR components. I've been working with Derek and we've been formulating a plan for how to process through everything. So as the matrix gets updated, we've been working in conjunction on those things. So we'll keep you updated, but we have a good plan.
Thank you, Kelly.
Mhm.
Others? Input onto where the goals stand at this point? Okay, well, again, I just remind you, if you got suggestions or you want to make changes to it, get hold of Derek sooner rather than later so we can start to wrap this up.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I will get the finalized draft version finished up with, again, communications populated and economic development fully populated based on my discussion with Selectman Bowen and the discussion that was that took place on Wednesday with the EDC, and I'll get those out to you midweek. So if anyone has any questions or comments, we can put them into the packet for next week for any final changes and hopefully adoption.
Thank you, Derek. And then on the action matrix, we've got the changes to personnel plan and communication strategy. I think you're working on that, right, Derek? That's kind of-
Yes, I think what we've kind of rolled those into the select board goals, and I've talked to Vice Chair Boyer about an approach that I think will work once the goals are adopted, that we can move that forward.
To make sure they line up.
Yes.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Let's see, there was the grants, we already talked about those. And then there was the vehicle reports. Looks like we've just got one vehicle, which is a DPW six-wheel dump, has a leaf spring issue. It's scheduled to go to Donovan Spring on the 14th. Adam, any update on that? Is that still a go? Adam? No?
Sorry, slow on the trigger finger. Yes, still scheduled to go on the 14th. This is the
Great.
second one. You may ring a bell. We had another truck with a leaf spring issue a couple weeks ago too.
I remember that. All right, I don't see anything else on the agenda. So we do have a non-public, so.
Mr.
Yep.
Chair, you do have a second public comment. I
Oh,
will.
that's right. Thank you.
There is nobody currently on the telephone.
Great. Okay, thank you.
I have a question for
Go ahead.
Adam. Before we get out, I have a question for Adam on the DPW side. Are we back to full staff, or are we still scheduling people out?
We are still in the reduced staffing rotation right now. Indicated to EOC last Friday that my goal right now is to coincide with the end of the stay-at-home 2.0, the extension. So right now we're circling June 1st on the calendar for.
So what is that?
So the current stay-at-home expires on the 31st, unless extended or walked back. So we're working on plans to get back to full strength on the starting on the 1st.
Because I get more calls about the guys being out and questions on that, and I think we need to get a good explanation as why it's still at it when other people and are getting out and working, especially in that type of industry. So that's why I bring it up. How many people do you have out?
So right now it's a rotation. So the average, it's almost exactly 1 for 1. So it's basically they're on for a week and then off for a week as we cycle through the essential functions, which we'd indicated back a few weeks back were the solid waste, so curbside, transfer station, the ground and equipment operation at the transfer station, the long haul trucking, any burials, cemetery preparations, the emergency stuff. So any, pothole repairs, sinking catch basins, that kind of stuff. VACON crew's been going out for their cleanings with 2 vehicles. The couple storms ago, some tree down type stuff. I think that's the bulk of it. Normal permit, issuances, dig safes, equipment repair. The fleet garage is coming in quite a bit for emergency vehicle repairs and then some of the PMs as they're in.
Are there other DPWs that are doing the same thing that you know of?
There are. It's responses, just like, if you ask 20 people, you're going to get 20 different responses about where we are as a society in dealing with this, and you'll get 20 different DPW responses too. So it's across the board. Some, especially the smaller crews that have, 4 or 5 employees total, they're understandably so pretty well straightened out. But some places, including Manchester next door, are shutting transfer stations down except for 1 or 2 days a week, that kind of thing. So there's a wide response.
I hope you can understand why the people are asking questions. I mean, this is perfect. We're getting right into construction season, and they're not seeing a lot more going on. So they have a tendency to start asking. And me, myself being in town for so long, and I'm sure Paul's the same thing. We get friends and neighbors asking the questions. So I want to have a good answer. So you're shooting for June 1st.
That's the goal. And we get the questions too, and totally understand it's uncharted territory, of course. And I think we said it early on and said it often. It's hopefully we look back and think that it was the right thing to have done. And unfortunately, we'll never really know if it was effective or not effective. Other than I can tell you up front, we did have a spate of illnesses, and then we've, knock on wood, been fairly healthy since going to the rotational shift. Right now, as we sort of look to get back full strength, though, and I think other departments are having the same discussions, we've got to figure out PPE consumption, and do we have enough? Right now, I don't have enough PPE to get me through probably much longer than a week at full staff. If we're all masking up as the governor's generic business guidance indicated we should. So we're looking at cloth masks, getting more gloves, that kind of stuff. But that's the main push right now. How do we shift our operation? What do we do? How much PPE do we need? And what's the plan? What's going to drop off? Knowing that we've had a little spell here of less than ideal productivity. What do we do to make up for that? And what's going to get pushed?
I hope we're keeping people busy, Adam, because I got a couple of calls, and they even had one resident stop by my house over the weekend saying, "What's going on? Why isn't more stuff getting done around town?" I don't seem to see a lot of crews out there doing stuff. So just be sensitive to that, please.
Absolutely.
It's exactly what I was talking about, Carlos. We've been around long enough that people don't feel bad about stopping in your house and banging on the door.
Exactly.
And Derek, as the town, how are we looking? Have we had any cases or problems with employees as far as coming down with the COVID at all?
No, I can speak for Town Hall. We've been fortunate that we have been, most of our employees have stayed healthy throughout this. We are starting to prepare plans for opening Town Hall up to public, and we're working with staff here as well as the Emergency Operations Center on what the most appropriate reopening plan is to protect the public as well as employees, and what additional cleaning we'll need to do. I met with staff today to start get the barriers constructed at all our customer service counters and how we'll handle that. I know, talking with the fire chief, we will be coming out with some additional guidance for employees as the weather has gotten nicer, as Memorial Day starts to creep up and people have been cooped up for a long time. I think it's time that we need to probably advise employees town-wide of what risks are still out there. If people make the decision to travel out of state on non-essential travel, what they may risk and what impact it might have on their own sick time, their own vacation time, if they come back from out of state. So we're working on those issues as well.
Thank you. Good job, by the way. Good.
Sorry, Pete, you cut out.
Going.
Yeah. So Derek, we had some.
I just said it was a great job the way things are going.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think everybody's pulling together real well. Derek, we had some brief discussions about restaurant openings and guidance for that. You just maybe just brief us a little bit on where that's at.
Yes, the planning department, zoning and health officer / building officer here have been working with the fire department to come up with a very easy, 2-page almost questionnaire for any of those restaurants that are interested in opening next Monday on May 18th. The governor did make some modifications, and the guidance is they basically can open up but all the seating will be outdoors. There's quite a bit of distance between tables that needs to occur, so it might require some businesses to consider using sites not typically used, whether it be a portion of their, their parking lot or maybe some grass on the side of their business. I know that the fire department has been working and visited at least one to go out and map out where they can put that seating, and we're going to be trying to finalize that tomorrow so that we can get that out to restaurants. Again, it's not trying to create another application permit, but it is trying to get them at least talking to the fire department and talking to those site plan considerations so that we can get them up and running if they choose to do that on a temporary basis under the governor's emergency order.
Good. So you said the guidance is going to be ready tomorrow?
We've got, everybody's provided comments, so I'm hoping that can get a finalized one either tomorrow and then get it out tomorrow or Wednesday. The fire department has already had some businesses reaching out to them, and they have gone out on site to meet with them to talk about best practices and how they can provide those services under the emergency order that was issued by the governor.
Good. And you use the standard outlets to get the word out to folks?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We would do that, as well as work with the planning director for any contacts that she has directly with businesses, so that she can reach directly out to those restaurants and see if it's something that they might be interested in pursuing.
Thanks, Derek. I think it's going to be a huge relief to both the businesses and the folks who really want to get out and do something. So thanks for working on that. Do we have anything else there, Derek? I don't see anything. I don't have anything. We do have to go into non-public. So
I'd like to make a motion, we go into non-public under RSA 91-A:3, number 2A for compensation.
Thank you. Motion made by Peter to go into non-public. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Seconded by Kelly. I'll take the roll on that. I'll vote yes. Kelly?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
And Chet?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to go into non-public portion of our meeting. This will conclude the public portion. So wish everyone a good night. Stay healthy. Stay safe.